Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Amparucci and today I'm going to show you guys how to make
these delicious caramel apple cakes, and they're perfect since fall is right around the corner.
If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up and also don't forget to click down below and subscribe to my channel.
To get started, I have two 4-inch cake pans which I've lined with parchment paper and greased, and I'm going to fill these with vanilla cake batter. Now I'm going to need a total of 4 4-inch cakes, so I'm baking 2 at a time. And I bake these at 350 degrees for about 15 minutes or until a toothpick inserted in the center of the cake comes out clean and they're nice and golden brown. While my cakes are cooling, I'm going to get started on the apple pie filling that I'm going to be using as a cake filling for these caramel apple cakes. So to get started, I'm using 4 apples. You can use about 3 apples depending on how big or small they are. I just made a little bit of extra filling to snack on because it was so delicious. And what I'm going to do is just remove the skin out of all my apples. I'm using 2 Granny Smith and 2 Gala apples. You can use whatever kind of apples you want. Then I just slice my apples and I place them into a bowl. Now to make this filling taste a little more like apple pie filling, I have half of a lemon that I'm going to juice. I have half a cup of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of fresh ginger, or you can also use apple pie spice. And I'm going to add all this into my bowl with my apple slices and mix it all together. Now here I have a small saucepan which I've heated to about a medium heat, and I'm going to add that apple pie filling that I just made, and I'm going to cook this for about 5 minutes until the apples are nice and soft and the mixture has thickened slightly. So here you can see that the mixture has thickened and all that cinnamon and lemon juice has reduced into this nice thick caramelly syrup. So I'm going to remove this from the heat and I'm going to place this in a separate bowl and let it cool completely in the refrigerator. Now that my cakes are completely cooled, I remove these from the cake pans and I begin leveling only 2 of my cakes. I want to keep that dome shape on 2 of the other cakes because that's going to be the top part of the apples. Now to keep my cakes nice and moist, instead of using simple syrup, I'm going to be using that delicious caramelly syrup from the apple filling that I made earlier. And I'm just going to drizzle that over the cakes and it's going to keep them nice and moist and also give them that delicious apple filling flavor. And then here I'm using some cinnamon buttercream. All I did was just grab my regular Swiss meringue buttercream and I added a few sprinkles of cinnamon onto there, and it completely transformed the frosting into this delicious cinnamon apple flavor. So I'm just going to fill my cake with the cinnamon buttercream, and then I'm going to pipe a ring of buttercream around it, and the ring is going to act as a border for the filling. And here I'm adding the apples from the apple pie filling that I made earlier. And oh my, does this smell delicious. And now here I have some homemade caramel. You can use store-bought caramel if you'd like. So I'm just adding some homemade caramel and drizzling that over the apple. Then I'm going to add my next cake layer. I fill that with buttercream, pipe a ring around the border, fill that with the apples, add some more caramel on top, and add the final cake layer on top. Once my cakes are completely stacked, I place these in the freezer to firm up for about 20 minutes. Once they are nice and firm, I'm going to carve these into an apple shape. So I have a small apple here to help guide the shape that I want. And I'm actually going to flip these over because once I flip them over, I feel that they were more of an apple shape than they were before. So I have a bread knife and I'm just going to round out the tops and then taper that down at the bottoms. once I'm satisfied with the apple shape on the cakes, I go ahead and I just carve out a little core in the top center part of the cake. Now I'm going to crumb coat the cakes with more of that delicious cinnamon Swiss meringue buttercream. Once the crumb coat is complete, I go ahead and give this cake a second coat of buttercream, and then I let it set once again. To cover the cakes, I have two different fondant colors. I'm using a green fondant color and a red fondant color because I want to make two different types of apples. I want to make a Granny Smith apple and a red apple. So for the first cake, I'm rolling out the green fondant and I'm going to drape this over one of the apple cakes. I'm going to use the bigger apple cake because I feel that Granny Smith apples are always bigger than other apples. So I grab my fondant, and before I add the fondant onto the cake, I'm just using a wet brush to help smooth the buttercream and also to act as a glue between the buttercream and the fondant. And I drape the fondant over the cake, and I use a thin fondant roller to press in the indentation at the top, and then I use my hands and a fondant smoother to tuck and rub the fondant all over. And when I get to the bottom of the cake, I just flip it over, I trim off the excess fondant, and I begin tucking it down all the way. Now to make the apple look more realistic, what I'm using is some golden yellow and ivory food color mixed with some vanilla extract. And I'm just going to paint some details onto the apple to make it look more realistic. So I have an apple here to help guide. I'm going to try to paint these little spots that this apple has and also lines just to make it look more realistic. And I also want to give it more of a golden brown color as opposed to just a flat green color. So I'm using a small brush to add the details onto the apple. And then I use a bigger brush to spread the paint all over. And now I'm going to let this dry and work on the other apple. Now here I have my red fondant, and I'm going to roll this out, and I'm going to repeat the exact same steps that I did for the green apple cake on this red apple cake. Once I finish covering the cake, I come in with that same paint that I used to cover my green apple cake, and I'm going to paint my red apple cake to make it look a little more realistic. While my cakes are drying, I'm going to make the caramel for the caramel apple cakes. So I have some fondant that I made a caramel color using brown, white, and a little bit of ivory. I'm going to roll the fondant into two separate balls that are the same size, and then I'm going to roll the fondant out to be about 5 inches in diameter, enough to be able to cover at least half of the apple cakes. So now I'm going to add the caramel part onto the apple. So I have my caramel fondant and I flipped it over so that the clean side is going to be exposed on the outside. I'm rubbing my apple cake with a little bit of water to help the fondant stick, and then I'm just going to drape the caramel fondant upwards. And using my hands, I just press the caramel fondant against the apple cake to help that stick. And I repeat the same step for my other apple cake. Now that my apple cakes are covered in caramel, I'm going to add some dowels in the center of the apples to make it look like actual dipped caramel apples. So to help the dowel stick and for us to actually be able to lift the caramel apple cakes up like if they were actual caramel apples, I have some melted candy melts, and I'm going to pipe this into the hole in the center of the apples, and I'm also going to pipe some onto the dowels and then stick the dowels in the center of the apple holes, and then I'm going to place this in the refrigerator so that it can set. But before I place this in the refrigerator to set, I'm just going to clean off the excess candy melts at the top of the cake. Now that the cakes are completely set, I can grab them with the stick, and as you can see, you can lift them up like an actual caramel apple. So now I'm going to add a little bit of decoration onto each of the caramel apples to make them look like candy covered caramel apples. So for the red caramel apple, I'm just drizzling some more candy melt, and I'm going to make it look as if it was dipped in caramel and drizzled with white chocolate or candy melt. And for the green apple, I'm just going to cover this in fall colored M&Ms. So it looks as if it was dipped in caramel and then sprinkled with M&Ms. And these amazing and super delicious caramel apple cake replicas are complete. If you love caramel apples, give this video a big thumbs up, and if you loved my caramel apple cake replicas, give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Now I'm going to show you what one of these cakes looks like sliced open. And let me tell you that when I tasted this cake, it was amazing. Oh my god, this cake tastes just like a hearty apple pie. That apple pie filling is everything. Give this recipe a try and let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.